It's time for another YouTube Sponsors Exposed! Now, if you're familiar with my series, I have a flair for the dramatics and the jokes and the antics when we do these. But the style of this video is going to be a little bit different because the nature of this product, it's not cereal or soap. It's something a little more serious, and it's something that I personally take seriously. I'll get into more of that later. But today we're talking about BetterHelp. If you don't know what BetterHelp is, it's basically an online therapy service. You could do a lot of doctor's appointments via video chat, so why not therapy? Kind of the concept here. And I tried BetterHelp so that I can let you guys know two important things. One, is it as advertised? And more importantly, two, is it worth it? If you've never seen me, don't know anything about me, a good deal of my content fringes on or directly addresses mental health issues that has to do with the slew of mental disorders that I deal with, like ADHD and autism. So needless to say, just my condition of existence gives me a heightened sense of awareness and consideration towards all things mental health. Beyond this, that's also what my educational background is in. I have a degree in psychology, and I was about to go in and get my master's in clinical counseling, but I decided not to because school is awful and a scam. And also, I realized I would not be patient enough to be a good therapist or counselor, and the path to just be a psychologist, which means I would just study other people, required even more school. I became a musician and content creator instead. It's the same career path, right? Speaking of making music, if you like what I do in exposing these products, please consider supporting my music project after the tone. Here's a link. That's the plug. Back to BetterHelp. So I didn't have to make up any phony baloney stories when I was going in to apply for a therapist at BetterHelp. I listed the things that I would or have gone for therapy before anyway, and let it do its thing. Now, the main advertisements of BetterHelp that I've seen are convenience, affordability, while still being the same sort of therapy experience you'd get anywhere else. And in my experience with the company, I'd say one of those three things is true, and the other two are kind of true. So let's start with the true thing, convenience. It's very convenient. You can text your therapist at any time. The sessions are easy to schedule. It's nice to not have to go anywhere. It's very convenient. But where we start to kind of divert off of the path of where I'd agree with the advertising is the affordability and the idea that the care is one-to-one what you'd get in traditional brick-and-mortar therapy. So let's start with the affordability bit. BetterHelp is somewhat less expensive than therapy options I've seen. That has a lot to do with your own health insurance and things like that, obviously. BetterHelp ranges how much it'll charge you based on your annual income, and I played with the dial since my annual income fluctuates to see how different those prices would be. And at the end of the day, it's in the range of if you went to therapy 4 times a month so far as the cost, and that's how many sessions it gives you, with each session costing between $15 and $30 less per session than if you did it in person. Now, that might seem like a significant savings because it is on a monthly basis, but the big catch here is you have to pay each month in advance with BetterHelp. And if affording therapy is a big issue for someone, I don't imagine that having to pay a lump sum of $300 to $600 all at once is gonna make therapy affordable. When BetterHelp starts to actually feel more affordable is if you book an extra session, because they're very inexpensive, like $15 to $30 for an extra session a lot of the time. So while there are elements of BetterHelp that are more affordable, I wouldn't consider it significantly more affordable, mainly because you are forced to pay for the month all at once. And that's a tough pill to swallow if you're in a financial rough spot trying to get therapy. It's a lot easier to just be paying for each session, and when things are a little tight, you just skip a session. I think if BetterHelp had more of a pay per session type of model, it would be a lot more affordable. But their model is heavily based on a lack of trust that the people using it will continue to use it. Hence, they make you pay for a month in advance to make sure that whether or not you use it, they get paid. Now let's go into the quality of care, because that's the most important thing, I would say. BetterHelp advertises that all of their therapists are licensed, etc., which is true. A lot of them have pretty good resumes as well. In my month, I interacted with 2 different therapists. I wanted to see kind of how changing therapists would go through BetterHelp, and once again, to the credit of the convenience of BetterHelp, when I decided to change therapists, it did not notify the old therapist. It just gave me a new one. It was very non-confrontational and easy. So anything that has to do with convenience, BetterHelp has in spades. But let's talk about the actual care and the 2 therapists therapists I interacted with. Both of these therapists had a long history of therapy work, were clearly experienced, but both of the therapists I worked with had a very similar issue where this felt like a side job to them. It's very clear that this wasn't their main occupation, and if it was, it didn't seem like that. It's kind of the difference between hiring a professional driver and calling an Uber. And when it comes to my mental health, I'd rather hire a professional driver rather than get a random Uber. It's not like the Uber driver can't drive, but it is a very different experience, and one that's going to be a lot less predictable so far as what kind of quality you get. Whereas with a professional driver, you always know what you're going to get. The second therapist I got, for example, canceled what would have been my last therapy session an hour before because he said something came up at his primary job. Now, what's funny is as I was scripting this video, I had already made note that both of my therapists seemed to have other occupations, but I hadn't asked them about it, so I could not confirm nor deny whether this was the case. And luckily, as my last session got canceled, I got confirmation that at least one of my two therapists was doing this as a side hustle. And I believe that's true of the first therapist as well. It felt very much like, well, it's the evening, I'm done with my real job, let me go talk to the sad people on the internet because I've got this therapist license that I'm still sitting on, might as well use it. Most of these people don't seem like they're practicing therapists outside of BetterHelp. They have whatever accounting or whatever job, but they happen to be a licensed therapist and have been for years, so why not make more money on it? It's very similar kind of contract work you'll see insurance agents do. There's plenty of potential that you'll get a great therapist this way, just like there's plenty of potential you'll have an Uber driver that was the best driver you've ever been with and better than most professional drivers. The real issue is that luck of the draw. And I suppose you could always roulette cycle therapist after therapist after therapist until you find one that you like and does things right. But the entire virtual scope of this form of therapy also loses a lot of the importance of what therapy is meant to do. That human connection can only go so far even in a video format as opposed to in person. Unless you're suffering from very severe agoraphobia, I think it's important to actually take the time to get in a car, if you have a car, or ride a bike or whatever, to get to a therapist's office and have that real, authentic, in-person interaction. I understand some people don't have the opportunity to do that, and in those situations, that might be where BetterHelp comes in. But if you are an able-bodied person who is able to get to a therapist's office, you should be doing that. Which leads us to the obvious question then, is it as advertised? Overall, I'm gonna say yes, they are licensed therapists, it is convenient, and technically, in the right scenarios, it is less expensive than traditional therapy. But to the more important question, is it worth it? No, my overall is no. I think there's very specific use cases where this is worth it. Generally speaking, if you're someone who hasn't tried therapy or you're looking to do therapy and you're thinking of this as your entry point into therapy, don't. I could see this turning a lot of people off to therapy for the rest of their lives, and that's not a good thing. This should not be an entry point into trying therapy for the first time. This should not be seen as a first go-to for therapy. This country in particular has a mental health crisis on its hands, and things like this, I would say, are not going to help with that crisis. No matter how well-intended it might be, the virtual atmosphere is not conducive to the best type of therapy, and the nature in which they are clearly contracting their therapists rather than treating them as full-time employees is also cause for concern. So with that, we conclude in saying BetterHelp is not something that I would recommend. If you want to check out my other videos that are a lot more lighthearted and goofy, check out the playlist up here, I think, of all of the other YouTube sponsors exposed.